Good afternoon, and welcome to Reimagining Healthcare Delivery by migrating critical workloads to AWS. I'm Angela Shippey, Senior Physician Executive and Clinical Innovation Lead for Nonprofit Healthcare. I'm an internal medicine physician by training, practiced as a hospitalist for many years, and also held Chief Medical and Quality Officer roles. So I have been an end user of healthcare technology my entire career. I'm thrilled to be here today with Dan Bennett, the Chief Technology Officer of Geisinger Health, who's helping to lead their digital transformation. Today, we want to talk to you about who is AWS, what we're hearing from healthcare customers, AWS healthcare, and upskilling for the future. Now, I want to get a sense for who's in the room with us. How many of you are clinicians? All right, how many of you are chief technology officers, chief information officers, analytics? All right, there's a few hands there. How many of you are builders? You're at your organizations building and making this happen. How many of you are from provider organizations? All right, healthcare and life sciences, more health tech? Fantastic. Well, it's great to have all of you here, and I know that all of us are consumers of healthcare in one way or another. Whether that means that you directly have been a consumer of healthcare or indirectly with family or friends. And so you might be familiar with the picture that's up on the screen right now. This is an operating room with a clinical team in it, and you see a clipboard with a piece of paper. Now, it's been a while since there's been a lot of clipboards around. They've been replaced with workstations on wheels, or they might be mounted to the wall. But the goal would be, can we get to this? Can we get to an operating suite where there is data and images and the real-time monitoring of the patient right in front of them? So that really, they're gonna just look up, and in their line of sight is all of the information so that they can have an optimal outcome. Well, at AWS, we're mission-driven, just like the organizations who are providing this care. For over 17 years, organizations have leveraged AWS's global cloud infrastructure with the broadest and deepest set of services to have a secure and truly reliable platform. And for over 9 years, there's been a dedicated practice to healthcare and life sciences that has physicians like me and other specialties, nurses, researchers, pharmacists, chief information officers, analysts, all who have walked in the shoes of many of you in this room. And it is this group who's working in collaboration with customers, bringing the industry knowledge and technology together to be the trusted advisor to global healthcare organizations. So when we have the opportunity to talk to customers, this is what we're hearing from them. 3 big themes. One is the decrease in margins. There's been a degradation. There are 3 major reasons why this is happening. One is the cost of labor, supply cost, and the other is the overall cost of care. Now, traditionally, these were easily managed, but more recently, there's much more volatility and variability, and it's getting a little harder. The next is the workforce. Workforce that's demanding to be in an environment and have the tools and training that's needed right at their fingertips, allowing them to work at the top of their license or the top of their skill set. And we know that when workers feel like they're doing their best work, that's a top factor in resilience. And then lastly, what we've heard is about the consumer, the patient across the continuum of care who's saying, I now want an experience where I can achieve my best health, have access to care when and where I want it, and be a member of the care team to ensure that that care is being delivered in a way that's meaningful to them. At AWS Healthcare, we are invested to innovate on behalf of customers to really address those challenges I just mentioned. And with that, leading to the development of unique, purpose-built services that are focused on what's important in healthcare and life sciences. Take AWS Health Omics, providing organizations with the opportunity to be able to take data, multimodal analytics, from DNA to health records to medical imaging, and to be able to utilize it to have more insights, improve clinical outcomes, and really help advance scientific discovery. How about AWS HealthLake? A HIPAA-eligible service that provides for secure transfer of unstructured data and unlock powerful query and search capabilities. How about AWS Health Imaging? Allowing providers and software providers to run their medical imaging applications in the cloud, and with that, be able to decrease the cost and help improve the infrastructure. And then lastly, how about AWS Health Scribe? The opportunity for a vendor to be able to take clinician and patient interactions and be able to transcribe them and summarize those notes and make them readily available. All of these services to make it easier, to help achieve those outcomes that consumers want, to achieve the outcomes that the workforce wants, to help healthcare and life sciences continue on their mission and achieve their goals. And we know that in the highly regulated healthcare industry, it's extremely important to be able to do this, and a platform that's secure, that's reliable, and helps to improve those digital relationships. And lastly, can enable innovations like generative AI. And we've been talking about that the entire week. So here's some key areas where Gen AI can be used. So for medical research, how about being able to fill in some missing data automatically? Helping to improve those data sets, being able to enhance therapeutic development, and identify rare diseases and accelerate the time to advance therapeutics. What about clinical efficiency? How about summarizing large patient volumes and increasing the time it takes to decrease the time it takes to do that? Then you're allowing more access to care. Now there's an opportunity to better understand the patient's clinical journey and personalize it for them. How about operational efficiency? Utilizing Gen AI with operational efficiency provides that opportunity to take manual tasks, duplicative tasks, and make them easier, automate them, so that you can improve efficiency, decrease cost, improve the access. And this would be a great opportunity to bring in Amazon Q. And how about patient experience? How about using conversational chatbots, agents, to be able to make it easier for patients to get the information that they need and to be able to have it in a way that's personalized just for them? And then again, digital health, where we're giving patients the access when they want it, how they want it, answering those questions any time of the day or night. Well, in order to do all of that, there has to be an understanding of the cloud. And not just the technical folks in an organization, but everyone. And there are lots of ways to get there. So one is, we have over 600 courses online, and we're happy to help you curate that content for certain roles in the organization within and outside of IT. For those who really want to accelerate their learning and receive certifications, we can help you with training with that as well. And then there's global conferences just like this one, like reInvent, where you've had the opportunity to come and hear in real time what's next and to talk to each other and partners about how you can continue to evolve and improve your cloud infrastructure. And just like it says here in this quote from Forbes, it really is about the people. It's more than services and servers. It's about upskilling the workforce to be able to sustain that ongoing development. So everything I just talked about is absolutely possible. It's not just aspirational. And I would like you to hear from AWS customer Dan Bennett, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Geisinger, to walk you through their journey and what they're doing right now. Please welcome Dan to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's good to see that some of the folks that are involved in the project came to see. And we'll have some time at the end for some question and answer. So we'll be able to take some of it here or out in the hallway. This is actually a real fun thing for me because we were here last year on the stage as well with some of similar information, similar content, but it was more, this is what Geisinger is going to do. This is what we want to do. This is the plan. And now we're back to really give an update on what's transpired in the last 12 months, where our journey's gone, and some of the things that we have in sight for the next year as well. So a little bit about Geisinger. Geisinger is a Pennsylvania-based integrated delivery network. As the slide shows here, we're not just in the provider space. We also have a health plan. We have a School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and we round that out as well with research. So part of what makes us, I think, successful in some of this space is we've been able to integrate and transform and find efficiencies across all of these different business lines and segments using technology. Geisinger's been a very technology-forward company for many years, and this was one of the logical next steps for us to really start jumping in to cloud environments, cloud-native services, and expand our data center reach beyond the traditional brick and mortar. So, I think a lot of people get tired of talking about COVID, right? We've kind of come out of that. And what Geisinger did, which was a little unique, not across the whole sector, but it was definitely the minority in healthcare, was when that hit and margins thinned and all of those headwinds started hitting the industry and many of us, we started doubling down on transformation. We started spending money, additional money, ramping up and accelerating many projects across the organization to try to tackle things like supply chains, things like diminishing payments, loss of margins, all those kind of things, make us more efficient, and really prepare the organization for the future. Because the whole industry was kind of pushed into and down a hole in order to respond very quickly with sending workforces that had never worked from home, thousands of people. And we did it in a matter of a week, 2 weeks. Went from maybe 1,000 to 5,000 or 6,000 people working from home. So that highlighted our need to be agile, quickly deliver services, and be able to pivot for the organization. Again, as a nonprofit healthcare organization, you still have to have a slight margin so you can continue to reinvest in your company, the community you serve, the buildings and the facilities that you deliver care. So many of these projects that we kicked up were aimed at that as well. And then ultimately, being a healthcare organization, our number one mission is to better serve the community and provide better care, right? Better health easy is one of our lines. And we take it very seriously. So again, many projects were spun up in the organization. Many of them are still going. Some of them have been completed. One of these many projects was our cloud transformation. And there was two other ones that we're going to talk about in the presentation around how to get your organization ready, how to get your application portfolio ready. When we double click on those three areas that we were focused as an organization to continue to modernize and push ourselves to be better, these were the three kind of pillars with a little double click of some of the things that when we were spinning up those transformation projects, they were focused on. So when you think about cloud transformation and how it relates to each of these, because again, you can't deliver better care if you're not performing well. You can't perform well in this industry anymore if you're not adaptable. So when you think about cloud and the agility and the plays in that space, it covers a lot of these things from optimizing your operational and financial performance. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the idea of reducing your technical debt over time, not having hardware sitting in your data center, not have unused capacity sitting in your data center, and getting to a more just-in-time type model. Forward-focused business model, I covered on that. That is where, again, we're looking forward, not backwards, and where we need to go as an industry and as a company. Driving efficiency, we are just scratching the surface, I would say, from a cloud perspective in the efficiency space, but that is going to be one of the major benefits that we've already seen some fruits of, but we'll continue to double down on that. And then finally, innovate and technologically advanced healthcare. I firmly believe you can't do that if your infrastructure and your services and your IT team and your data and everything else is not in lockstep with that. The company, healthcare today, cannot be innovative without a strong technology backbone and a strong technology workforce to support it. So this quote from the Harvard Business Review piggybacks on the previous one that really targets one of the biggest investments that we did as an organization. And it wasn't the biggest financial investment, it was the biggest time investment, where we spend a ton of time training and educating and getting the entire organization up to speed on what the cloud is. Because ultimately, as you'll see as we go through this project, moving to Amazon Web Service, moving the organization, although was a IT transformation project, was an entire company transformation project. At this point, you would be hard-pressed walking through the hospital or walking through a facility and finding somebody that has not been involved in some aspect of this project, whether testing, providing feedback, and other things there. So one of the critical components and one of our additional transformation projects was around IT's new operating model. So prior to this project and others, we were a traditional IT shop. We had application accountability across multiple leaders. We had infrastructure teams. We had all those normal things and all their nice little silos and their stacks. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time on is thinking about what do we need to look like for the future? What are the skills? And how do we get our current staff what they need to be successful? Because they were vested. They've been knocking things out of the park for years, and now, we've come and say, hey, we're going to go to Amazon. So we had to really step back, do a skills gap assessment, find the right trainings, and again, those trainings were not just for the technologists. We put a lot of them through training, a lot of them got certifications, but we did executive cloud training. So people that want to know what is the cloud, what is Amazon. So folks in the business were taking courses, things like that. And then ultimately, as we did this, and we're now in the far side where we're in this iterative build and constantly thinking about, do we have the right resources applied in the right spot at the right time? And how do we be nimble? So historically, when you think about an operating model, it's very rigid. It's very HR-based, right? You report to who and so on and so forth. We've gotten to the point now where we've kind of collapsed some of those silos. We have a single executive in charge of all applications. We have myself in charge of cloud and infrastructure and identity and access. We have all of those things now kind of spaced out where they need to be, and we've started cross-pollinating and collaborating across teams that normally would not have necessarily talked. And we continue to look at, as we go into an application reduction slide next, you'll see as you reduce your portfolio, you free up time for folks to start cross-training and cross-pollinating those skills so that we can build a workforce for the future as we sustain the current. So the second big piece, and one that was tackled as we were in the design phase of the cloud, so this one kicked off very early for us in the overall project, was around application rationalization. And to be honest, we talked about this for many years. We tried to do it many times, but ultimately, the way that the industry has changed and the headwinds and everything else, we were forced to get it done. So we went through our application portfolio. We found duplicate applications. We found applications that weren't used. And we went and we trimmed hundreds of applications out of our portfolio. We are continuing to do this today. This has now become an operational type activity. The business is involved, our business stakeholders is involved, IT is involved. And as we bring on new applications that we need, we look to sunset other applications. And as contracts renew, we look to make sure that there's still a valid application and is it the right thing for Geisinger in the future. Because part of modernizing our infrastructure is also modernizing our application portfolio. So the next two slides are just going to give you a little glimpse into what Geisinger's overall infrastructure looked like pre-project. So this is one of these, exact same slide as last year. This is where we started, okay? So at the end of the day, most of our servers were virtualized. So we were a heavily virtualized environment, which set us up for a lot of this stuff as well, because you virtualize one, you virtualize the next. So a lot of concerns when you're a major physical hardware type shop and doing physical to virtual conversions, things like that. I wouldn't say didn't come into play, but it was less challenging. We also were a heavy Windows shop, and then the alternative for that is Linux as well. So our two main operating systems function well in almost any public cloud. So we were set up very successfully there. Again, x64 architectures. We had a good, healthy divide between production and non-production. And overall, you'll see some of the distributions there across the different things. This one is the interesting slide for me, and this is one from an automation perspective that I would say we've barely scratched the surface on so far. But doing analysis on all of those servers in the previous slide that were in scope for migration, the applications that run on them, we ran and looked at, okay, what's the CPU utilization, what's the memory, what's the disk? How much technical debt is sitting there, right? How much stuff did we overbuy because a vendor X said you need this or vendor Y said you needed that? So we actually ended up getting the data for this. And it was a compelling part of the business case that as we get to the cloud and as we optimize, which is one of our big focuses for 2024, is to start looking at these systems and starting to actually customize and ratchet down certain resources that aren't actually needed, independent of what the system requirements of an application says. And we'll have an example of this when we talk about our EHR that we migrated to AWS here in September, about how being in AWS allowed us to be agile with that deployment, and also with the upgrades that we've done post-move, have been able to actually reduce compute and not have technical debt in our data center. So as any healthcare organization, we have one of the popular electronic health records out on the market. We were one of their very first customers, and this kind of sparked one of the business cases for change. And again, for us, cloud isn't solely a play on cost savings as an organization, okay? Some things you put out there will cost you less, some things you put out there will cost you more, but ultimately, when you look at these, you have to look at more than just cost, but agility, time to deliver, and all of those other things that you get. So when we're looking at these things and our spend and everything else with the cloud, and on-prem, we were able to take our electronic health record over the course of this project. We had multiple environments, and we started moving with our training environment first, right? The one that everybody plays on. And as part of that, we did extensive testing with the EHR vendor, as well as our partner. We did use an implementation partner. It was Deloitte, and they brought some tools to bear. And ultimately, we were able to show that performance on AWS exceeded many of the performances we had on-prem. Now, part of that was, when you think about your spending and being fiscally responsible, we knew this was coming. We knew we were doing this. So we didn't replace systems on-prem that should have been life-cycled because there was no need to. So what was really good with that is training went well. So we said, great, let's move on. Then we put another environment out there that's closer to production. We did a bunch of testing and worked great. There were some bumps along the way. Each time we did it, we learned something new to apply to the next one. Then we got to the point where our last environment before our disaster recovery and production, we put that out there. It continued to perform very well. So in September, we had planned to move our entire organization from operating on our EHR on-prem in central Pennsylvania to AWS in Virginia and run it for 1 week so that we could see performance. What do we need to do to be better at it for the big go live here at the end of the year? What did we miss in our prep? What did we miss in our steps? Right? How do we make sure that we reduce the impact to the users when we finally pull the trigger here next week? And we put it out there. We had a couple bumps, but the issues list was much shorter than anybody anticipated. And ultimately, the biggest issue that we ran across was the wrong license was applied to some of our virtual gear that limited the interface engines from being able to send their stuff as quickly as possible, so they backed up. Once that was identified and remediated, they flushed out in a matter of a couple hours. And about 2-3 days into it, it wasn't the executives, it was the engineers, it was the application owners, it was the end users of the organization that started saying, wow, this is working better, it's faster. Do we really have to go back? So there was many people that sent me emails, hit me up on Teams, talking to other executives that said, do we really need to move this back? So we sat down Wednesday after the go live from the previous Friday and had that discussion. And we made a decision to leave it there. There was risk. We're now operating in a hybrid environment with our production EHR in the cloud and our disaster recovery on-prem on completely different infrastructure, completely different model. And we've been running that way since. We went through an upgrade of the EHR since this. We upgraded both on-prem and in the cloud with minimal bumps. We also implemented new features of the EHR that required many new servers since then, in the cloud and on-prem with very few bumps. And on top of that, one of the great benefits that we've realized as part of this is when we did those upgrades, these systems typically, when you have to do an upgrade or you have to add a module to it, you need these couple hundred servers for this, you need these couple hundred servers for that, and if you don't have it, you go out, you buy it, right? You bring it to the data center, you stand it all up, and then you do your upgrade. In this case, we overshot from a Citrix perspective by, I think, a couple hundred servers. The guys in the back can keep me honest, but a lot of servers that typically we would have virtualized. They would have been run on VMware, all that great stuff. But because we were on the cloud, we just turned them off, right? We didn't pay for them anymore. They were gone. We had another instance, again, with the EHR, where with the big module we implemented, they started seeing that they didn't need all the servers based on performance metrics. So I think for about a week, they started turning off 20 servers at a time until they found the right thing. Historically, we would have bought the hardware for those. Granted, it may not have been much because we were heavily virtualized, but still, it would have been sitting there in my data center, depreciating for 5 years, heating, cooling, everything else. And in this particular case, we were able to just turn it off. Take it out, no technical debt left behind. We're also taking this journey with our claim system. So that's about 70% out on AWS right now. It's open enrollment season, so we're obviously not moving production right now. But that's slated to be done here in the February, March, April timeframe. But the one point that I kind of jumped over is, by us leaving it out there, the team's calculated. We saved over 1,000 hours of human capital by leaving it there instead of bringing it back. We've also prevented 2 additional downtimes to our end user community, because it took us 3.5, 4 hours to flip the org from on-prem to EHR in the cloud. And during that time, things were up and down. So we didn't have to do that again. So next week, and for the rest of this year and the beginning of next year, our final EHR environment will go in our second region of Amazon. And then we will start performing DR testing, flipping between multiple regions of Amazon, instead of flipping on-prem to the cloud and back. So with that, we've been able to minimize impact on the end user community and also saved countless hours of IT, as well as everybody involved in testing. This slide highlights many of the Amazon native services that Geisinger has used and implemented. This isn't all-encompassing, but it's also meant to kind of spark the conversation of, did we do it all native? And the answer is no. So as far as the way our architecture was, and the one thing that we did, which I think may be unique in a way, especially in our industry, is when this project started, we greenfielded it. It was a blank sheet of paper. So we have a combination out there of infrastructure as service, so your lift and shift, right? And we've got product-based applications that we've built on AWS as well. So when we thought about how do we support what I'll consider a traditional IT architecture on top of the cloud, as well as thinking about adaptability and innovation and everything else, we need a product-based model as well. So when we did that, we built the network design, brand new, right? We interjected co-location centers to be able to have dedicated connections as well as diverse paths to the cloud, as well as that. We even diversified the technology that's used on those lines to get us to the colos. Some fiber, some not. Different geographic regions for the paths of the cables as well as everything else. So we took the opportunity to look at this from the time it leaves our physical facilities to Amazon and back. And then when we talk about security and a data center that you've had for many, many moons, you've been building security on top of the data center for many years, putting a little bit more here, a little bit more there. With this, it's brand new. So we took an approach being able to separate out business units at a network layer, production, non-production, putting more guide rails and protections in between those things to help protect these applications. We used a lot of these native services, but we also worked with some of our key partners. So our Amazon or AWS instance and environment is not just strictly this. We brought with us, top grade firewalls and part of the reason we did this, and things like Citrix and F5 technology and others, is we already had those skills. We have the management interfaces. So part of that was to be able to blend the new native with the technology that we had before, so that when we're skilling and we're looking, we're able to tackle this all at once. So, so with that, we're also in the constant cycle of, okay, well, we've used that. Can we go to a cloud native at some point? What are the things we need that may not be there? And having those conversations, again, with our integration partner, with our AWS technical teams, things like that. So again, a lot of this we've used, a lot of this has been extensively leveraged, and some of this is on the horizon for us as well as we continue to move down this path. Some lessons learned across all three of our transformation projects, and I highlighted one in each column as kind of the ones that stood out as we were thinking about this as an organization. And when you think about your operating model, governance, and partnering across the organization, promoting automation and self-service to increase productivity and speed is critical. And we're laser focused on that. We haven't gotten there yet. We do a lot of automation within our data center. We do a lot of automation within the AWS environment. But that's one of our big priorities for 2024, is to continue to build our tool set out, continue to skill our teams, continue to take traditional infrastructure and think differently about it. Infrastructure as code, application developer mindset, versioning control, being able to recreate things with scripts instead of the traditional way of having to go through screens or rack and stack a new piece of hardware, things of that nature. The other thing with the app rationalization is to drive enterprise standardization and consolidate redundant applications. So we'll have an analogy later, but ultimately, you don't want to take stuff to the cloud. First of all, that won't run in the cloud. And secondly, you don't want to take stuff to the cloud that you know at the end of the day you're not going to need anymore, or it's going to be shut off, or it's going to go away, or you have 4 of the same things with 4 different vendors. So early on, this was one of our critical success factors, was to really step back and look at what are the applications in our portfolio and how do we handle those. And then on the infrastructure side, the largest thing from a lessons learned, and probably the biggest thing that I would encourage everybody to think about, is how are you going to do organizational change management? That's not IT change management, where I'm going to change this config. This is how do you change your organization to think differently? For our project, this project was sponsored at the top level of the organization. So this had top-down approval, top-down buy-in, and it really allowed us to change the way that we operate, look at the way we deliver services, and really engage with our user community. Because I wasn't joking at the beginning of the presentation. When we did this project, as we spun this up, there was so much testing and so many people in the organization involved. We host our electronic health record for community partners. They were involved. They're not even our employees. They were involved in testing. So this project spanned a very large set of team members and colleagues. So you got to make sure you're investing in the organizational change, you're investing in the skilling and the education to make your team successful. Because again, you've got a lot of smart, adaptable resources within your organization. And one of the best things I think we can do for folks like that is offer them a path for career development and a path for change. And in order to do that, you've got to really invest in the people. So this was a quote from our CIO that really kind of sums up and nails home the executives in the organization, as well as many of us, myself included, the amount of time and hours and energy that our folks put into this to make this successful, with, again, one of the smallest issues lists I've ever seen with a go-live for a system as massive as that, is a testament to the skills and the abilities and the drive of our staff. Right? And their willingness to step up and change with the organization. And again, we were supported by AWS and Deloitte and many of our technology partners. When we went live, we had Citrix, Palo, other ones like that. They were online and live at 1 a.m. when we were doing this in case we needed them, right? So again, I can't say enough about the amount of people, organizations, and teams that were needed to make this successful. And, you know, it brought teams together that had never worked before together. So I'm going to ask Angela to come up to the stage.
Okay, like, is that not amazing, hearing that story about what they've done at Geisinger? I think Dan deserves a round of applause for sharing what they've been doing.
Well, it's really for those guys in the back and everybody else that, like you said, you've got the leaders and then you got the people that actually do it. Those four guys back there are some of the guys that knocked us out of the park, as well as our partners up front with Amazon and Deloitte.
Absolutely. A round of applause for everybody. That's why it was so important for us to know who was in the room. It's the builders, it's the partners, it's all of you who are making a difference, because we really do think this is a new day in healthcare. It is time to start looking at this a little bit differently. And it's also time to start saying we can really get to that OR suite in the future. So Dan and I wanted to talk about what is it that you need to do on Monday to get started or to advance what you're already doing.
Yeah. So this is the application rationalization piece, right? Think about getting your house in order. Are you, and the operating model, are you structured in a way, is your organization ready to change the way that it's done? It's definitely, especially if it's in an industry or an organization that's very traditional. And I don't mean traditional IT, I mean traditional business models, traditional, project management, all of those kind of things. You have to think about, are you ready to do that? And then you have to start thinking about what's your tech debt and your application debt. Because I've moved only a couple times, many of you have probably moved a lot, and we always pack stuff in boxes, take it with us, and then never look at it again. So the idea with this and this analogy is, don't pack stuff in boxes that you don't need, get rid of it. Because we're all going to fill our basements up with those boxes and eventually go back and wonder why we even brought it to the next house.
No, that's a great point. The next is, sometimes it can be overwhelming within an organization to say, we want to do something new, whether you're going to migrate for the first time, or whether you're just going to modernize, or you're continuing to advance your current infrastructure. So what are your strategic goals? That's a great place to start, so you can look at which resources you're going to utilize and prioritize where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as your 6, 12, and 18-month plan, there's a couple key things that you need to think about. And one of them is, are you able to do this yourself, right? We had a lot of smart, capable people, some with Amazon experience, because we dabbled with it with research and other things in the past. But we didn't have the amount of labor needed to do a project like this, right? In some cases, we needed some skills added in order to do it. So you need to think about, do you need a trusted implementation partner to help you and your team and your organization get there? Do you want to accelerate faster? Things like that. The other piece is, do not discount planning. Okay, even though we're talking about being agile and fast and speed to delivery and all that, don't rush through your design of your initial environment. That probably should have been one of our lessons learned. We had things that we had to go back and re-architect because certain little pieces might have been rushed. So part of our lessons learned and things there is take the right amount of time for your organization to design your foundation, because you're not going to want to go back and blow it up and redo it again.
And there was a significant amount of time spent this week on what's next. What is the emerging technology you're going to want to use? So now is the time to start thinking about that. As we look at those challenges that were discussed earlier about the workforce, part of the stress on the workforce is sometimes we're in a hurry up and get it done mode in healthcare organizations. By having a plan, following that path, and knowing where you want to go with emerging technology, then you're taking the whole organization along. And you heard from Dan how important that is.
And the final piece, I think I've beat this one into the ground during the presentation, but upskill your people. They're smart, they're hungry, so get them the training and the skills and everything they need to take you into the future of where you need to go, because there's a lot of talent. I know there is in our organization, and again, it's not just IT training. You need to educate the workforce and the executive suite and others on what this really means.
So, thank you all. Thank you, Dan, for telling us your story and sharing it with us. It is a delight to have you.